the part. Is that possible, Hans-Florian?
Yes, I try my
Thank you.
best.
So I'm very happy that you're here, David, and I would really like to hear what you're going to talk about. And after the first part, there will be a lot of time for questions and for a nice talk.
Thank you. I know some of you. I know Carl Dieter, Bodak, Hans Florian and I have communicated in writing. I don't know if Michael Bientale is here. I haven't prepared anything to present because I far prefer answering questions. Just hang on 1 second. This thing is asking me what my favorite language is. Do I need to answer that?
Yes. Yes, please.
It sounds like you might have switched to a different language. Please update so we can provide better quality. It's asking me if my favorite language is English. Well, I mean, rather German. Should I click German? It doesn't give me the option of English.
I'm not quite sure what you're doing, David.
Just something that popped up on the screen. I'm going to just cancel it.
Are you going to share the screen, David?
No, I'm not going to share the screen.
So then you can really speak English. It's not a problem.
So I would really like to have questions from people. I don't know who's read the attachments that you sent, Marcus. From that, there would be questions, I would assume. I don't want to talk about things people are not interested in. Yeah, so I was really hoping we could go around and see if there are any questions.
Yeah, David, is it possible that just like 5 minutes or something that you are going to talk about what you're doing in South Africa? Because I think most of the people have read the text, what I've sending in the email, but I think it maybe would probably also nice that you give like a short introduction of you so that we have like a personal picture of you, who you are, what you're doing. And then there will be a lot of time and space for nice questions and a deeper talk about it. But is it possible that you give like a short introduction, what you're doing? Because it's, I think, really big work for social scaffolding.
Yeah, it's possible, of course. I've lived a life doing this. I can speak for 5 minutes. So in essence, I'm a businessman. By profession, I wouldn't call myself I wouldn't call myself only a businessman. I have always wanted to kind of live a moral existence. And despite the fact that one gets into business and one thinks that you can't do it morally, if you pursue it with sufficient interest and openness, it becomes possible. So I started, I'm a trained accountant, I'm Steuerberater, and I went into I did some banking for some years, 4 years approximately. And then I went into essentially private business, and very shortly after that into my own business, which is in the concrete field. We make precast concrete products. I started off with 22 people making one product. We now have, and I made about 4,000 square meters a month of paving, this one product, and we now make 300,000 square meters a month with 400 people. And while all this was going on, if you can imagine the kind of thinking that had to happen to grow everything, your capacity, your machines, your people, your area of operation, your properties, your buildings, your ability to deal with the state and taxes and modern computer systems and so on. An enormous amount of energy goes into that process. And there's all kinds of textbooks that tell you how to do it. However, it never satisfied me. And I'm a Waldorf child. My father came to South Africa from Holland and established the Volida and Vala brands in South Africa. And I was used to meeting all those kinds of people that were associated with his business. In the concrete business, it's a much drier, harder environment. And somehow that lived in my soul. And during this process of building the business, I was interested in everything of a spiritual, scientific nature. I was really interested in the human being, the part the human being played in this. And eventually it became my time to read the threefold social order. And then I started to want to understand it and apply it. And we now are very committed to and have done lots to implement the threefold social order in our business on a scale that suits it. It's not a state, and it's a much smaller entity, but it's very possible to implement many things that support a threefold social order reality. And yeah, one has to think about it and put it into many people's consciousness. I think it's I call it an unfair advantage that we have the structure. It's incredibly powerful. While it's incompetent, it's powerful. And the question is, how do we make it more competent so that it's more powerful? But I think that's an evolutionary process that if we go too quickly, we can also cause damage. Is that a reasonable introduction? Are there questions from that?
Yeah, maybe I start with a question with two words you started with, moral and being a moral person instead of being a business person. And this is interesting because I always asked me what did Steiner think when he wrote or when he said the division of labor is the point where egoism has to be eradicated from social life, not in a moral way, but in an economic way. I always found it interesting. How could I eradicate egoism economically without, in the same time, doing it morally? Could you elaborate on that a bit?
I've never been put to that question, and I haven't directly thought about it.
You know the quote, do you?
I don't.
Oh.
It's not, I don't recall that being in, I don't know where is that quote?
National Economic Course.
It's in the National Economic Course, yeah. Might be in one of those lectures. I've read them several times. It doesn't. No. I can explain to you, to me, the biggest problem in the social order is the liberty sphere. I don't see a problem. Well, look, there's lots of problems. There's lots of problems in the other two spheres also because they've outgrown their importance. They don't understand themselves. But the reason that is because the liberty sphere doesn't understand itself. And for me, it's become for me, that's the big issue, is if human beings don't understand themselves, it becomes very difficult to know where they are when they're in the economic sphere or whether they're in the right sphere. Never mind the liberty sphere, the problems with Waldorf schools. So, to me, a recent thought has been that conventional thinking in all human beings as an inherent capacity of soul has led to the world that we have today. It's led to the existence of these three spheres in the unmanaged and unconscious way that they operate, in many places against each other. But that's just how it is from an ordinary capacity of an everyday person to think. To me, the challenge is to recognize that the damage in the world today is from a good quality of the human being, that's to think. But the problem comes in when it's not moral thinking. We'll put it this way, the solution is now to evolve from just thinking to moral thinking. I think if we can work out what moral thinking is, we can absorb the damage and waste and transform it into something positive going forward. I think threefolding inherently is a moral way of thinking.
Yes, I also I generally agree with what you said, and I think it's very important that everybody came around and understand his own position versus his own thinking, and this is the ethical individualist who acts from love. He doesn't he doesn't act because he already knows that it is going to be good. You can't know that in advance, but he knows it because he loves it. And this is kind of the mission statement for humankind on this planet, to add love to wisdom, to the wisdom which we already find. there are some English-speaking people here. Why don't you come up and with questions? Katharina.
I have a question, David. I'm just curious, how do you handle the issue of payment for your employees? Is there a system, or how do you do this? According to hierarchy, how their skills are, or how do you do it?
It's one of the areas that we've done an enormous amount of thinking and research, experimentation. So, you know, the normal problems with changing pay systems is it's outside of the law. So the law of today is very restrictive on what kind of payment systems you're allowed, certainly in South Africa. But we've done a lot of work on trying to pay the people for their product. And I can describe in great detail what that means. You know, the insanity of a rate per hour remuneration system is that the human being gets commoditized, and what he thinks about is his rate and his hours, and not too much else. It's a very self-destructing process. If one pays him for his product, then he becomes involved. His entire being becomes involved. And I can go into lots of detail. So it's an unfinished work. I think we've worked on it for 10 years. We got to a position where we offered our staff up to double their current pay if they would work on that basis. Because from my perspective, if a person thinks about the product he's making and not his rate per hour, you get so much more humanity expressing itself everywhere people are in the business. So to me, it would be easy to afford that double payment if you got a little bit more humanity. And humanity, I mean anything of a godly quality in human beings, anything of the quality of patience, love, diligence, openness, selflessness, positivity, courage, clarity, and so on. We've got 12 of them that we use to try and at least give people some kind of orientation to what humanity means. It's not their physical being, it's their inner life. The reality of business today, worldwide, is it doesn't come out of nature. There's no business that happens out of nature. Not one. Businesses only happen where there's providing for the material needs of others. So businesses only happen between human beings because we are providing, and this relates to Hans Florian's question on the division of labor. We provide for the material needs of others. And when you do that, you're in business. And it only happens where human beings are. And the difference between human beings and nature is a further developed soul and the presence of an individual I. And therefore, that must play a part. If you can draw that out of your staff in business, you get essence of what makes business from the very core is the human being. And people here would know that the digestive system of the threefold social order is the liberty sphere. It provides the sustenance and renewal for all social order, for the whole social order, including business.
Do you have any kind of guidelines or something that maybe a company who wants to switch from conventional ways to like a more holacratic way, like something that you could offer for companies that want to work with this impulse?
I have all the documentation, I have all the tests, I have all the everything. I have the problems dealing with the law, I have all of it. It's just not in a, it's not packaged to sell, but I'm happy to share it with anybody.
Okay. So how can one contact you?
By email.
Okay.
Yeah.
I put it in the chat. I put it in the chat, David.
Yeah.
Daniel.
And the other thing, Katerina, that we do is we have a threefold social structure. So in the organization of the business, we have a head of liberty, we have a head of equality, and we have two heads of economy, but for a specific reason. But essentially, we have a head of liberty, a head of equality, and a head of economy. And nobody is the chief there. They all have to work out how to make the others better.
Mm-hmm.
So if the liberty sphere in a business is doing what it should do, the people in the right sphere and the people in the economic sphere make better decisions. They're more moral, they love, etc. They're patient, they're open, they're courageous, they're factual, etc. If the economy sphere is benefiting from that, they get better results and they can put more money back into the liberty sphere.
Okay, I see a raised hand. Frank, go ahead.
Hello, Frank.
You need to unmute yourself, Frank.
Switch on your mic.
Yes.
Yeah, David, a company with so many people working there, the company, you especially, must be inspiring for many. Do you know if something is inspiring them, especially in a broad way?
So for me, I think what we try and do from a liberty sphere, because I maintain this thing that the problem is at the liberty sphere level. If you get the liberty sphere right and people understanding themselves, if you get self-awareness in people, then the other problems are pretty easy to solve. So I think what we try to do is we try to put consistent, repeated spiritual scientific concepts before people, not necessarily spelling that out. But I can give you a lot of examples. And so that they start realizing that what lives in them is what appears around them. So I think that's the ultimate form of motivation is when people realize that what lives in them appears around them. And when you show them repeatedly that because the outer results are changing because you inwardly have had a shift or a commitment or one of these human quality developments, and they see it in their own environment, they then become very interested in where they are inwardly. I would say that is a sustainable place of motivation. I wouldn't for one moment say that I'm inspiring in a nice way. I think what I've had to learn to do is hang on to the right concepts. That when one hangs on to the right concepts, and people are always meeting these correct concepts, that the concepts do an enormous amount of work on helping others to transform and grow. It's not necessarily me. I'm just a holder of the concept. But if I hold it with a real love for my neighbor, the concept has enormous power in doing its work on other souls. And they become familiar with this, they feel it.
Okay, another hand raised. Sven, go ahead, please.
Thank you, David. I'm interested in getting to know how you started the process. That means, did you have in former times when you had your company a typical old system, and then you moved on to the new system you're using today? And if so, I would like to know how you introduced it to your employees and how was their reaction. That I think is quite an important issue. Thank you.
I definitely had the old structure. And I didn't know what I was doing initially. I did what my soul had sympathy with. If you on a path of personal development, you get to know that your soul tells you things.
Most
yeah.
probably you might have had a moment where for you it was clear, I will guide my company in a different way and I will treat my employees in a different way. But they, on the other hand side, were used to be treated like always, and from one point to another you decided. But how did you transform it, that they understood it? And how was their reaction? Did they receive that well, or did that go step by step and automatically it was well received? I have no idea at all. So it's...
Yeah, it's a very patient process. When I as soon as I knew what I was doing, I shared it with them. So I didn't hide anything. As soon as I knew that I was going to think in a different way, and that I shared it with them. So I shared that I had had an insight, and that I was going to change my thinking, and this is the old thinking, and this is the new thinking. And I had all kinds of responses from people leaving, to not many of them, but there were cases. Some people thought they were so powerful after they learned one or two concepts that they could go and get a much better job. They never considered the social desert that they moved to. And there were others who stuck it out and yeah, like I say, I repeat the concepts. I repeat the basic, and I can say it here, spiritual scientific concepts: fourfold man, threefold man, body, soul, spirit, sentient mind, consciousness, soul. Business is not nature, and so on. I repeat those things over and over, and I repeatedly show them when I see it. I mean, and I've learned to see these things. I can see these things now. It took me a long time to learn to see the inner life of a human being expressing itself. And I can do this well. I've learned to do this. So, yeah, you're not going to convince anybody to go anywhere and believe in anything unless they experience it themselves. And I try to make sure in a very patient way that people experience it themselves. I've been there. I know what I had to go through to be there. I know how difficult it is for others, and I have to take them with me. I don't think there's a magic cut and paste. There's no kind of quick fix drug. I honestly believe this is the future of the human being is not going to be some magic book. It's going to be people working like we do, very slowly, very patiently, very accurately, and people's souls rubbing up against these concepts and finding them to be meaningful and true. There's no other way.
Thank you. The condition certainly is that somebody is ready and open for new impulses. And yeah, as you said, some people left. I guess they were not open for new ways. And those who have made the experiences, they start feeling well. But the condition certainly is that you are an honest person who says the truth. And yeah, that's the way to follow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joko, the floor is yours.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening, David. It's not yet clear for me. Did you? First of all, you don't probably have one location. Your firm is not on one location, or is it? Yeah. No. Because you mentioned 400 people are working in the firm on different locations. Yeah.
Yeah, we have different locations, up to 1,100 kilometers apart. Yeah.
Pardon?
Up to 1,100 kilometers apart.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And another question is, did you organize courses for the employees to understand the transformation or the different processes, working processes among each other? Did you organize in the first place courses, or maybe for new persons who come in new, they can now experience another social field, but in the beginning or during, maybe it's still necessary to adapt things. And I can imagine that you also organize courses for the employees, or is it only the experience in working together?
So, I mean, first of all, we learned how to ask the right questions at interviews when we interview people. So, we ask them questions and we try and establish where they are inwardly. Yeah, so we ask them about what kind of reverent feelings have you had towards life, especially in your early years. What did you revere? Because if somebody has revered something, they have a certain inherent soul quality. Rudolf Steiner talks about that in Knowledge of the Higher Worlds in the introductions, this veneration for truth. So one asks these kind of questions to try and establish what kind of people you're getting. More recently, what we've done is we've prepared a document called Joining the Company. And we give these people, before we even interview them, We give them the document, and if they don't like it, they withdraw. If they do like it, they continue. We ask them to send a written response. We do inductions. So when a person when we contract with people, we have all kinds of legal contracts, normal stuff, but we also have a thing called a handshake agreement. And a handshake agreement is just an agreement like two adult people would do with each other. I do this, you do that, and it's never legal. And there's six questions there, and we each answer the question. And if people want to, then we only go on to any kind of written contract or offer of employment after that process. So in that process, you can ask anything you like of them, and they can ask anything they like of you. So we really give people a chance to know. Most employees spend hours with us in their own time for nothing, asking anybody whatever they want to ask before we go on with even the handwritten agreement process.
It's a very carefully process to get to know each other.
It's very patient, and it's really important that you give people a chance to know where they're coming. Most people jump into jobs with absolute fantastical ideas about what's going to happen, and some of them out of desperation, some of them out of hope, and you try and take that away by giving them a slow introduction. We do things when we do our inductions, we call it. They're not courses; they're inductions. We do it on the Waldorf principle. So we set them up with content and experience, and then with with breathing in and breathing out, and then we do it with waking and sleeping. We do on the waking side, we run a whole lot of the same concepts through in the induction for a while, and then we leave it and we go to some other grouping of things that they need to know, and then we come back and get them we test them on the first or second lot or whichever number it was. So we do really careful stuff. We have many things that go on. So we have a Conscious of Humanity meeting every Tuesday afternoon at 1 o'clock, where anybody wants to come. We talk about human concepts. We do lots of things. At the moment, we do lots of things. We've got a mime artist there 3 times a month, and he's trying to expose ridiculous things, and I mean that literally, ridiculous things that people do in a humorous way, because we think people learn through humor at 100 times the pace, humor and pictures, at 100 times the pace that they learn in any lecture theatre. So we do some really funny things. We do drumming 3 times a month. We have drumming courses where people will play drums together. It's an African thing, but it's very social. We do lots of things to try and get the people aware of their humanity.
So it's a broad range of possibilities to develop oneself. And
we're desperately short of support of people to help us with this. There are not a lot of people that can help us with this.
Thank you.
Maybe I chip in with another question. I draw back. Frank, go ahead. Frank, unmute, please.
I'm automatically switched off the microphone. David,
I switch off everybody except the 2 ones not to disturb the recording.
Now I understand. Again, David, you made a kind of threefold balance and a game. And my question is, what is its target and its relation to the company?
Thank you. I don't know if people have seen the balance beam. Can you describe it briefly in German, Frank, for the others?
Ja, das ist eine Art WIP, nur nicht mit 2, aber mit 3, so dreifach. Und dann gibt es eine ganz andere Herausforderung, um ein Gleichgewicht zu finden. Das ist die threefold balance. And the game is, that you can explain, David, because that's nearby, I think.
Ich sage auch noch mal was dazu. Also eine Dreifachwippe, nicht nur 2, sondern 3 gleichzeitig. Und da kann es schon mal zu Kreisbewegungen kommen und man kann das nicht so leicht kalkulieren, wie wenn man nur zu zweit auf der Wippe sitzt. Man muss den anderen mit einbeziehen.
Ja, es ist eine dritte Dimension, die man eigentlich entgegenkommt. Und das ist, denke ich, auch die zentrale Aufgabe, die hier dann gemeint wird. Aber darüber kann David vielleicht etwas hinzufügen.
Okay, thank you, Frank. The balance beam was also one of these gifts that I received from the gods. I first used it as a small unit, this sort of size. It was on the table, and we tried to use it to show people where the business was, but where their soul would be taken in by the thing being in balance or it being out of balance. So we were trying to get away from the enormous energy that has to be invested in looking at an Excel spreadsheet to understand your business. So I made a threefold. It looks just like the balance beam, but it was with measures, and we try to develop measures which would help us determine if this business was in balance or not, whether all the spheres were supporting each other. And then we just made it because we could. We made it into a big one that people could stand on. And we learned a lot from it. It taught us lots of things, including that now the word is missing me. It's eine in German. It's the counterforce, the lever. In English, it's a lever.
Ein Hebel, ein Hebelarm.
Genau. So when you've got these three beams at 120 degrees to each other, the lever there is no direct lever opposite any one of them. The lever splits into two. And so the other two have to respond to the lever created by the one. In every case, in each case, the other two have to respond to the lever force created by the other one. And it doesn't matter on which one you are of the three, the same applies. So it's a very interesting thing that you can't have alliances because you just can't. Otherwise, you'll never get balance. The balance it becomes possible when you have leverage, when you're at the end of the balance beam. And it becomes possible when everybody has the same leverage. So the balance beam, we discovered, put in one's soul a real feeling of how the meetings need to function in the business. Frank, that's what it does. So when we have a liberty meeting, or we have an equality meeting, or we have an economy meeting, we're always trying to conduct the meetings with the same feeling that we have when we're on the balance beam. Yeah, it's a feeling that has to live in one. So it becomes possible to ask questions of the other two spheres that you would be much more difficult to ask if you could not first experience it on the balance beam. That's the balance beam. The game is it was an attempt to show that if we change our thinking, so what happens with the game is you start off with all the pieces in a bowl in the middle. And what you do is and all those pieces are 12 core economic concepts from the economic lectures, 12 liberty concepts from anthroposophy, and 12 right sphere concepts also from the threefold from Rudolf Steiner. And they're all inside this bowl, all on top of each other, where they're in a mess. And what I did is I created a thinking process where if you apply those rules, which are quite not the rules that society plays today. They are rules that where you have to help somebody else. Like, so when you help, if you're stronger than them, you can help them. And when you help them, they get more leverage on the balance beam, as it were. And so it was a game to show that if we have this different way of thinking, we can move existing social order structures into a new form, which is much more healthy. And that's what you experience when you play the game. Not only do you learn content from the economic lectures and towards social renewal and all these things, because there's all kinds of cards and learning processes that happen while you're playing the game, but you learn this kind of uncomfortable brotherhood feeling. And you see these pieces move into the most, it's incredible to watch how thinking can move society. It was an encouragement. The game's name is called Evolutionize, because it's not revolutionize, it's evolutionize. We don't have to kill each other to get there. We have to learn that if we get very strong, valid thoughts together amongst more and more people, that the world will move there anyway. And the game just shows that.
Okay, Frank, it's can we take Istvan, or do you have a back question? Okay, no answer.
This is Istvan. David, I've got two questions. First, how did you manage to make people taking more responsibility for what they're actually doing? I keep hearing from employers that it's specifically hard to get people to take more responsibility. So how did you manage to encourage people, to encourage your employees to take more responsibility? And my second question would be how what's going on in these meetings? You were talking about meetings of liberty, you know, the three parts of social freefall. What's the topic of these meetings? Thank you.
Thank you. I need to say this, and it's not necessarily what people want to hear, but I can't, when you're asking a person to take more responsibility, he has to make the decision himself. And the only way that you get them to want to take more responsibility is when they experience themselves as a spiritual being. When they can see that what lives in them is what appears around them. So I have on my table here some stones. And what I do is I ask people as a very elementary exercise to make an equilateral triangle in a single line out of a pile of stones. So I ask them before they start, what are the stones doing? And they say, no, they're just sitting there on the desk. And then I say, okay, now I'm going to give you an idea. It's a triangle, an equilateral triangle. Make an equilateral triangle by putting stones in a line individually. And they do this. They make this triangle. And you can, the triangle afterwards is pretty mediocre. Often not, it's not a good triangle. In most cases, 99% of cases, it's not a good triangle. Is a good triangle out there in concept in the world of spirit? Yes, it is. Why couldn't you let that triangle appear on the table here out of those stones? And you can see that what happens in them is they get themselves in the way of the triangle. They start focusing on local issues like the size of a stone or a particular something. They lose the capacity of the triangle, and their hands don't then follow the triangle. Their hands start to follow some smaller problem that they experience in the triangle. So they don't get the triangle right. They don't, I call it, allow the triangle to appear properly, because they get involved in what we call local optima as opposed to global optima. So this is just an example of how slowly you've got to go. When they have a look at their triangle and you take their stones and 30 seconds, I think about equilateral triangle, and I let my hands, my will follow the principle of an equilateral triangle. That equilateral triangle appears very accurately, and we take a photograph of theirs and we take a photograph of mine or somebody else's, and they see that they're not able to let a simple thing like a triangle appear. So you can't change what triangle these people can let happen just by moving stones. How can you expect them to take ownership of a job if they don't have the capacity to realize that they need to have the inner strength to hold, the thinking exercise in the foundational exercises? So I'm just saying, that's what you've got to work with. That's the problem of the liberty sphere. The liberty sphere is asking of people to do so much more than they can. We need to be patient. We need to develop our own capacity to let the concepts work on other people's souls, as I've said earlier. Concepts do the work for us. The spiritual activity of sharing a concept with others gets them spiritually active. And slowly they become fitter and stronger and able to take more responsibility. I'm sorry, there's no easy answer. What happens in the meetings is that we have very focused meetings. The one is a liberty meeting, the one is a economy meeting, and the one is a right sphere meeting, and the different topics are discussed. But as I said earlier, in relation to, I can send you the agendas we use. We work with we work with lots of stuff. I can't get to it. I'm worried to run over time here. But we work with what we call imagination. So we start every meeting off with an imagination. Just like the equilateral triangle, when we think it's an imagination. We start off each of those sphere meetings with an imagination in relation to the other two spheres. And we deal with the specifics of the rights, liberty, and economy spheres in that meeting, but we check in with the other two spheres what they need or what they have questions of or what they want to get clarity on or how they can help or...
Okay, we have 4 minutes left. Short question for Katharina, and then there's a question in the chat which I already want to pose to you. Katharina. The microphone.
Thank you, David. It's really great to hear you talk. I really enjoy it. And I just wanted to ask you, what about media coverage for what you do? Is there any, or how well are you known in your area?
I don't think there's ears to hear what I'm doing. I think that, you know, Das Goetheanum published an article, an interview from more than a year ago. We have all kinds of initiatives going where, but again, you can't, you know, this is the illusion of our times, is that we can move human souls, you know, in some kind of shortcut way. It's not possible. We have to live this. If people are interested, we'll expose them to everything. So we've had our first visitor to the company from North America, who it's a very interesting experience. I'm waiting for her written feedback, which I'm sure she'll share. And what happens is they also, you know, she's a prepared person, so she has lots of human capacity herself, but she could practicalize her own personal development in a practical way, which was not, it wasn't within her view previously. And this is how you do it. You do it soul to soul. And anybody who wants to is welcome to make contact and experience it and test it fully. We're not afraid of being tested.
Okay, thank you. There's the last question would be, what is your greatest wish for the future?
Thank you. Well, just to see, I suppose, to hope that it goes on beyond me and that the succession planning is good. You know, and we're really busy with that. I'm trying to put the business into a no capital situation so that other people can become caretakers. I would love to see other businesses trying this out. If the liberty sphere can't rescue us, maybe business can, because business is in so much difficulty with these people problems that if it takes ownership of the people problems of the liberty sphere within itself, it could be a real seeding ground for the recovery of the liberty sphere.
Thank you. Having answered Anne Budde's question as a last question, I want to thank you for your thoughts and your insights you shared with us. And we wish the best for the opposite part of of Africa from Europe, seen from Europe. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much all for your questions and for partaking. I really do appreciate it.
Okay.